Hi, this is Paul. I've just been listening to the recordings of the interviews between Jordan and Mikhaila and the reporter from the Times. I don't know, is this the London Times? Is it the UK Times? Is it just the Times? Somebody from the UK is going to have to enlighten me because I'm not exactly sure what it is. But wow. I've said it a number of times, but I'll say it again. Somebody at some point is going to have to, there's going to be lots of biographies about this man, and there's going to be bio movies about this man, and they're going to be insane because the story Mikhaila is telling is absolutely insane. And on top of absolutely everything else that's going on, to have a recording like this put out by the family is just amazing. I mean, truth is stranger than fiction. You can't make this stuff up. And for me, as a pastor, this sort of validation because, again, real people stories are real strange, like this real people story. So let's get down to it. So Jordan Peterson and the mass media. Sundays are busy for me because I'm a pastor, and often lately, a lot of Jordan Peterson stuff drops on Sunday mornings. So it's just like me and my fantasy football career. I can't get stuff done on Sunday mornings because I'm working on Sunday mornings. And so we do all the Sunday thing. And then afterwards, I usually sit down with Rick here at church and we make sure that the stream was recorded properly. And we try to figure out what we have to do to make the stream better, et cetera, et cetera. And then Rick is usually scrolling through some things. And up on one of his feeds comes this piece about Jordan Peterson. And so, okay. And then, but I look at him like, this looks like something new has dropped, but it's all old news about Peterson and the benzos and the rehab and all of that. And no, and so then I get home and I open up the Discord, just the general chat in Discord, because I usually skim it. And I'm just skimming the general chat in Discord, and they're talking about Peterson. I'm thinking something happened. So then dig in a little bit more, do a Google search, and then there's all these downstream pieces of the Times piece on Peterson. And okay, so this organization has done a major piece on Peterson, and it's full of all of the clickbaity things that we expect in the attention economy. The point of the piece is not really to tell a coherent story. The point of the piece is get views. Rick and I lately have been doing a lot of talking about how AI and the attention economy is, I mean, these AI robots on the interwebs are just designed to get clicks. And we've talked about the social process of that, but this article bears all the signs of that. Jordan Peterson on his depression, drug dependency, and Russian rehab hell. And these obviously, well, so this hit, and all of the big words are diagnosed as with schizophrenia. And again, if you listen to the recording itself, I can understand why the Petersons released the recording from all the interviews, and I can understand why the Petersons, I'm sure in advance, get the rights to all of the recordings of these interviews because they're going to need them because they're going to want to somehow, just like with the Vice News thing, get a record of the whole story and not just the distillation that the reporter has created to create clickbait in the attention economy, which is exactly what we have here. And the irony is that politically correct news likes to call out stigma, but they use all of the stigmas and stereotypes to get their click. This is somehow the unholy alliance between the new artificial intelligence that's gaming us all and milking us all to get the clicks and get the likes. And Jordan Peterson is in some corners, very high up there in the aristocracy of the attention economy. And we're going to get into that in this little video. Some of their religious fascination with certain aspects of the current ascendant ideology becomes present in lines like this. To the millions of young men who idolize him, the erudite, unflappable 58-year-old is kind of a fantasy father figure. He is erudite. He is not unflappable. And anybody who's watched him carefully knows, well, and he talks about it in the interview, how he's a clinical psychologist. So actually, if you've ever been in any therapy, especially if you've been in marriage counseling, you know that it's the job of the shrink not to go off on your crazy train. Okay, so he's learned unflappability, and he actually talks about it in the interview. You got to listen to the recording. The recording's incredible. It's not an edited, detailed recording. You're basically going through primary source with that material, but it's really amazing. It's an amazing recording. Again, this whole story just keeps getting more amazing as it unfolds. And people look at it as fodder in a culture war, and it is that, but it's the life of a family, and it's I just can't listen to this stuff and just think, wow, this is just amazing stuff. Anyway, back to the stuff. He accused the neo-Marxist radical left of trying to feminize men. Yeah, if you put it that way. And defends traditional masculine dominance. No, that's not really accurate. Now, you might say that's your takeaway from it, but I think if you were to talk to him about that, he would significantly nuance that line. And the next thing he has completely debunked on numerous occasions. According to Peterson, men represent order. No. Masculinity, order, femininity, chaos within sort of a Jungian structure. Again, the dude is very technical, and part of his desire to be very precise with his speech and never lie leads to a lot of this misrepresentation that the Times is actually doing on him. To his critics, he represents the respectable face of reactionary misogyny and a dangerous gateway drug to online alt-right radicalization. He addresses that directly in the interview, and I think he's exactly correct that, well, to his critics, that's what he represents, but it isn't true. And I think a fair reading of him shows that. And again, listen to his conversation with Hurwitz. Listen to his conversation with Douglas Murray. He is trying to be nuanced, and there is no nuance allowed in the AI-fueled attention economy. And then this job they did on Mikhaila, which, if I were her father, now granted, Jordan is not responsible for whatever comes out of Mikhaila's mouth or what she decides to do with her life. But what annoys me is that all this PC zealotry about, how tough the media, the world is on women because they're fixating on their personal appearance and stereotyping them according to their personal appearance. Because on one hand, poor Hillary Clinton had to wear pantsuits because men can just get away with uniform, as Peterson says, uniform suits, but women have to worry about it. But then, of course, at the inauguration, we have endless news reports about what Kamala Harris and all the women there were wearing. And it's like, hey, if you really don't want to up the feminine physicality index in the media, stop harping on it. But they go right to it, and they're going to have to make a link to Trump, of all people. Unrecognizable from the ordinary-looking brunette from photos just a few years ago, Mikhaila today is a glossy, pouting Barbie blonde and talks with the zealous, spiky conviction of a President Trump spokeswoman. If you're going to be PC, heal yourself. Because, all this complaining about trading on feminine appearance and, they're just doing it right here. All right, I'll try not to be too ranty in this video. And so the Petersons put out the recordings of the interview. Now, Jordan will say again and again in the interview how private a person he is. And fair enough. And this is going to get into these questions of mass media, social media, the the complex relationship between mass media and social media, which is really true. So they counter the story, and Sunday morning it comes out, and 11 hours ago I just saw on my phone because I'm listening to the end of it. And again, as a pastor, I listen to this story, and I know people will listen and just have all kinds of, I have my own comments and critiques, but as a pastor, in my experience, it just has the ring of authenticity. These are people telling the truth from their perspective about what's happened in their lives, and it's primary source material. It's outstanding that this stuff is. Here's the thing: if Peterson had a professional staff around him to manage his image, this would not pass. I'm glad they don't. This is Peterson. He tells the truth. He's a private person, but he's stuck in this vice between social and mass media, and this is what's demanded of him, and so he puts it out. And I'm glad he does, because I think overall the truth and the honesty will prevail, but at such a price. So I think from this recording, you actually get a very clear picture of Jordan's mission and his motivation. At the end of his interview, at about 1 hour mark, he basically lays down and says, "This is what I want people to know." And when you listen to it, it's exactly Peterson. That meaning is a bulwark against suffering. And this isn't just a coping strategy. Peterson, this is what you need to do to stand against the inevitable suffering in the world. This is his message. This has always been his message. And it's why he was a clinical psychologist. And it's why his life is shaped the way it is. This is Peterson through and through. And he's very clear. And he says, this is the message I want to get out there. But that's not the message that the Times is going to give, because that's not the business that they are in, because they are not, for all of their politically correct, social, ascendant morality responsibility, this is not what they are after. People are throwing around the word grifter. The mass media are the grifters. Okay? Because the shape of this article is all about the grift. And that doesn't mean that it's factually untrue. It just means that, well, there are telltale signs that there are little moral agendas which come peeping through, and they can't even abide by their own moral rules, which again, as a pastor, I say, well, that's common human hypocrisy. I don't expect anyone to maintain their common moral rules to any perfect degree. And, that's part of the reason I don't like Peterson's arrange your life in perfect order. No, it'll never happen. I'm a Calvinist. I believe in total depravity. All of our works fall short. They all do. But you actually get from this recording, I think, a very clear picture of Jordan and Mikhaila and what has gone through in their life. And I'm glad they released it, because if you compare it to what now is going out to the Times and via all the downstream publications, the distortion of the mass media is evident. And the continual corruption of AI motivated engines that are serving to up Google and those things to us are also evident. The schizophrenia, the Rehab, everything is People Magazine now. Everything is Entertainment Tonight. Everything is hard copy. These were shows in U.S. television that showed on the early afternoon that would take news stories or celebrity stories and tart them up and serve them up to us. It's all yellow journalism now. So listen to the interview. It's worth listening to, and it's a roller coaster ride. And again, at some point, some biographers are going to take to have their chance at Peterson's story. It's not done yet. It's that much is true. It's not done yet. And for a private guy, this is very transparent. But that's Jordan, and he does that because of his mission. And if you don't understand his mission, you're not going to understand him here. So I go through some of the history, and there's some really interesting aspects of his history that are made clear. The self-portrait prior to C16, and Jordan goes into that. A good degree of meaningful career success prior to the wave. He's regularly on public television. He's a very popular university professor. He had published a lot. The guy works like a workhorse. John Vervaeke recently talked about his collegial relationship with Jordan. And again, when John talks about that, and John is very circumspect about that, to John's credit. If there's one thing I've learned in my last couple of years and my interchanges with John Vervaeke, he is a deeply moral man with very high integrity that cares a lot about representation and what he has to say. I have nothing but respect for John Vervaeke. And, I think his comments, there's very, very few comments that are out there about Jordan as a colleague, I think are truthful and accurate from every other sense I can get of the picture from this distance. Again, I do not really have a personal relationship with Jordan Peterson at all. I don't know him behind the scenes. I think in order to know that, you would have to really have a relationship with him prior to this wave, and I don't. And in some ways, that's helpful because all of my information comes from stuff that he himself has said or the few little things that people around him have said. And for the most part, the people around him, they're not looking for pieces in People magazine, with the possible exception of the Toronto Star piece by the man that said Jordan Peterson is dangerous because he wanted to buy a church. Well, guess what? I work in a church, and that kind of danger maybe the world can use more of. So his identity as a clinical psychologist and a teacher, that's how he was. And he spoke on Ontario Public Television regularly, had a few things on YouTube. He had written Maps of Meaning. And he does bristle a bit. And he did, if you look at my conversation with him from April 2017, he does bristle a bit at comments that, hey, where were you before C16? And fair enough. All of those things. He was a successful clinical psychologist. He had started a number of businesses. He had a very successful teaching career. I think someone mentioned to me, because of Greg Hurwitz, it probably moved him to write 12 Rules for Life, which I think was the right thing to do for him. But I got Rick in my head now. And as my son says of Rick, he's the only person at Living Stones who has any sense of production values. And it's quite true. But that's who Jordan was. And he resists. Was there swell before C16? Yes, but in terms of category, and perhaps it's more difficult for him to see that because he's looking through his own eyes, the social impact between before C16 and after is obviously incredible. And along with that came the celebrity, the wealth, the fame, a lot of the good stuff. Again, he speaks, and it was actually helpful to hear him speak. He always gets choked up when he talks about how people come up to him and give him testimonies of how they've helped him. And again, what is at the center of Jordan Peterson? He's not a grifter. What you see right there when he breaks down and cry, if you want to know what's at a center of a person, watch those moments, because there they are. And can it be faked? Is that story about Bill Clinton, shedding a tear on stage and walking off and making a cynical comment? Yes. Are there sociopaths out there who do this? Yes. Nothing from the background of Jordan Peterson says sociopath at all. I don't think it's terribly hard to get an accurate, maybe not extremely high resolution, but an accurate picture of this man based on what is out there in the public record. So his self-portrait, again, sounds true to fact. Had a history of depression, 14 years on SSRI. Depression runs in the family. Talked about his great-grandfather and his grandfather's depression. Autoimmune disorders. The issues with weight, the issues with food, the issues, and if anybody who knows anything about a lot of different psych meds, it can add weight. And, And you get the last section of 12 Rules for Life. He writes quite transparently about being the parent of a daughter who is having a significant medical challenge and trying to instill in his daughter a certain toughness, with providentially, spoken as a Calvinist, came to work in her heroic, these things that want to make this about gender. Would he say, I'm sorry, Mikhaila, you need to stay home. Julian needs to come with me into the belly of the whale to rescue me? No. This stuff irritates me. So yeah, this is going to be a ranty video. No, Mikhaila goes. And again, read the end of 12 Rules for Life. Get a sense of the parents' love for their daughter and the sacrifice put into it, and get a sense of the daughter's gratitude. And yeah, everybody has a right to their politics, everybody has a right to their opinion, and everybody has a right to their personality. You might not like their personality, you might critique their personality, and everybody's got their flaws. Again, I'm a Calvinist, total depravity, everybody in the world. But, what has she done to save her father? Critique it, criticize it, whatever, but I'm impressed. It's pretty heroic. And so the heroism that Jordan and Tammy showed in Mikhaila's life through the very painful, and I'll tell you, people can endure their own illness and their own suffering, but the suffering of a spouse, and especially the suffering of a child for a good parent, nothing tests you like that. They're your child. So, again, I find is it told from their perspective, and so we'll have the biases of a first person telling? Of course. But it also has the honesty and the power of a first person telling. And then they had success with diet, the lion diet. And of course, Mikhaila's story and Jordan's story are intertwined deeply. That much is true. And they will be for now. Whoever knows what chapters will come. But success with the diet. And you can see it in the films, the weight loss and multiple aspects of health. And of course, another thread in this story is that of modern medicine and the medical industrial complex relationship between drugs and health. And you would imagine, again, and this is another thing that lends credibility to this story. Jordan is a clinical psychologist. He's a scientist. And so, he's not primarily a religious fundamentalist, okay? Not at all. And so he believes in science. He believes in data. But both with he and Mikhaila, they get into the frontier that some of you know quite well. So this frontier where our medical technology reaches its end and doesn't really capture everything that's there. So what they're doing and again, as a pastor, I see this all the time. People who they've been in the hospital, and most people don't have the kinds of financial resources that the Petersons now have because of the C16 wave. Jordan Peterson's one of the few people who actually could monetize the woke revolution. Well, no, that's not true. There's D'Angelo, Kendi, they've gotten rich. Maybe even Bernie Sanders, the most embarrassed millionaire you can find. Yeah, why not be transparent? And so he and Mikhaila have, treaded on the borderlands of this is as far as our scientific knowledge goes. And the story of Jordan's rehab is a story of, it's a very common story that I see as a pastor, that all the doctors, again, if the doctor has a syringe, the whole world looks like pluckable skin. And whereas the first chance I get to have that COVID vaccine, I'm going to get it. But I also understand the skepticism of many people who look at this and say, not so fast. And especially nurses who work in hospitals and see, a drug is the answer for everything. And so all they did was load Jordan up with drugs. And so he had to, all of my episodes, watching every episode of House throughout the years. You get this TV education in medical technology, through a story about a psychopathic doctor. House really wasn't a psychopath or a sociopath. But yeah, so, when you get to the end of what the modern medicine establishment has to offer, you go off into the frontier where it's wild and it's anecdotal and it's religious and it's haphazard. But when you're facing the end of your life, that's where you go. I don't talk a lot about my older sister has a YouTube channel, and this has been part of hers. She had chronic fatigue when she was a young mother, right after she got married, and she spent years dealing with that. And for myself and my family, who are just sort of conventional in terms of trusting doctors, and you should trust doctors, but she, by virtue of her health, she had to claw back her health by diet and careful watching and a lot of internet doctoring. And, the thing is a mess. And I tease my sister endlessly about this, but I love her. And she knows I'm teasing her because I'm really very proud of her that she was able to win back her health. But this is the fight of Jordan and Mikhaila. And Mikhaila, especially, and Jordan and Tammy, because of everything that they've been through. It's not either or. Finding your own health or medical technology. It's both and. It's the same with religious people. So this story is very much a story about that, especially the second part where Mikhaila is doing the interviewing. And if there's one lesson you learn from listening to this, it's beware of reporters. And Jordan has said that many times, but and again, we'll get into a little later into it's kind of the bind that he's in and why. So multiple health aspects improve, daughter's health improves. Of course, lots of skeptics, even Joe Rogan, who's not adverse to that frontier. What do you mean salt and beef and water? Yeah, sounds crazy to me too. What about vitamins? What about balance? What about all that stuff? I don't know, but who knows? Who knows? I certainly don't. So the C16 wave hits, and he's already into this. And there are these episodic food issues, a lot of talk about cider, and, Mikhaila's talking about this thing really through Jordan and Mikhaila, but really Jordan for a loop, where he talks to Rogan about 25 sleepless nights, and the literal internet, of course, jumps on that. You can only go 11 nights, yada, 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 yada. Have you ever had a sleepless night? Did you have zero sleep, or didn't you just not remember the sleep? I mean, we've all been there. The literal internet jumps on all this stuff. So then he gets off his meds for depression, and of course he hits the status rocket. And now, one of the interesting things about this story, and the good things about this story, is the interchange between the various aspects, See, now I'm fixated. I'm going to try and get the camera right, because my wife made a comment. She says, you really got to get up higher in the camera. And because I was talking to her about Rick's, trying to improve the quality of my videos. So anyway, so the interchange in this story between the peculiar personalities of the Petersons, and I don't mean that derogatively. We've all got peculiar personalities, and they are who they are. Everyone, again, as a pastor, people are who they are. And part of the sin, part of the illusion, part of the deception around mass media is that mass media reproduces for us an idealized picture of what life should be. Nobody's life fits that because it's an idealized picture. It's a religious picture. Fair enough. But as all the postmodernists note, it's a managed agentic picture too. And so people look at Peterson and we look at him on the screens and it's like, oh, that's unusual. And then the mass media reinforces the projected ideal and critiques everybody against the ideal. And yeah, it's, map territory, unmapped territory. The idealized picture becomes map territory, and anybody who fails it, but they're quirky and interesting and they have money and they become famous. And Jordan Peterson is a king, not the king, but a king of the attention economy. As you know, Benjamin Boyce pointed that out to me once. He's like, boy, what if I make a video that mentions Jordan Peterson? Whoosh! And same on my channel, you know. And so that leads to all the temptations. Do I juice it? Do I use Jordan to get the analytics to go up? Oh, this stuff. You know, it's the weeds and the tares. There's no staying clean with any of this stuff. There really isn't. So it, you know, the suspender video and his status rocket, and now, well, what is he? I've talked about this before. Can he go back to becoming a university professor? I don't know. You know, is he going to do, what are those masterclass courses? They don't want him on, probably. They're so PC and masterclass. You know, because again, it's this mass media idealized idol, basically. It's, you know, in Nebuchadnezzar, when they have them all bow down when the music plays to the idol in the book of Daniel, that's what we're dealing with. It's an image. And it's idealized, and it's much more nuanced than just a statue on the plains of Babylon. It's the image that's out there, and it's fueled by mass media, and it's archetypal, it's demonic, it's a principality and power, and if you cross it, it punishes you. But it also keeps pulling you up to whip you again. And that's sort of what they're doing with Jordan. But for Jordan, again, meaning is essential to combating inevitable suffering. So on one hand, you know, his diet and everything, the attacks on him, and he talks quite transparently in the video about the cost of those attacks. I mean, the only thing worse than having there be a protest about you outside your classroom is your treatment from the idealized principality that holds you up to beat you, to reinforce the image that they are making, that they demand the entire country needs to bow down to. Where is Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego? See, I'm using biblical references. I'm a preacher after all. You're probably going to have to read the Bible. If you want to read a really exciting book, try the book of Daniel. You'll love the first 6 chapters. 7 through 12, a little bit trippy. Anyway, Jordan's got a bigger platform than ever. In some ways, he doesn't need to buy a church now. There's no church big enough to house his following. He doesn't need the University of Toronto to be a teacher anymore. He's got YouTube. He can be a teacher apart from that platform. And surprisingly enough, he is delivering the outcomes of clinical psychology through YouTube. And again, this was a realization I came to 1 year into this, how many of the people who sought me out, and maybe, okay, anybody listening to this, for some of you, don't take this personally, but in some ways, some of the people who found me were some of the harder cases and said, you know, and I began to notice this pattern after a year that the people who were coming to me, they were telling me this insane story about how watching YouTube videos was healing their depression. Just watching the videos. And, you know, lately I've been thinking about why do we get so obsessive with Jordan and watching his videos? Why, you know, just recently in one of the question and answers with Vervaeke, someone basically said, I don't know what to think of Jordan, but I can't stop watching the videos. And again, the one video I made that I know Jordan watched, which was the video I made about The Office. Why do my children keep watching The Office incessantly? Because they're working stuff out. And again, it's something deep in us. He's a depth psychologist. It's something deep in us that is motivating our actions. And we're watching Jordan because Jordan, just watching him, it's rewiring, it's doing stuff in our brain. And of course, the media calls that reprogramming. Well, it sort of is. Radicalization. No, because the mass image the mass image on the plains of Babylon, which is the mass media, which is reinforcing these images. But now it's not just sort of an image that we can sort of take on with clothing. It's our speech and our mannerisms and our morals, because the more in-depth the media gets and powerful the tools, first you have, images, and then you have story, and then you have radio or writing so that words can be replicated, and then radio, and then television, and then movie, and add music, and then we have LARPing. It's all a religious story. We're all conforming to an image, an idealized image, and mass media keeps putting that out there. Why, again, do we call them celebrities? Do we call them stars? Because we navigate the world by them. So he's got a bigger platform than ever. So his anxiety and the attacks are boosting, but his meaning is boosting too. And it's just fueling this status rocket up into the stratosphere. And this is how he's both authentic, because pick up Charles Taylor, The Ethics of Authenticity. He's authentic. He's completely authentic. And so bing, 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 the authenticity. But he's not quite PC. He's not quite in a line with Nebuchadnezzar's image. But his meaning and his success, it's all holding back the suffering. And I think about this vision that he had, that he talks about sometime, where he's fighting with the devil, and God says to him, but the devil's not going to beat you. And it's like, pretty prophetic. Pretty prophetic, Jordan. And there's chaos because of the success. And he doesn't like conflict. And the demonstrations are against him. And the hostile press interviews, because he's kicking against he's Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and he's about to go into the fiery furnace. And that's exactly where he goes. And of course, Peterson has all his Jungian symbolic interpretations of it. But it's the same story. It's the same pattern. It's the same message. I'm adding to it in a way here. So, and then he has to face allegations from a client. And, again, trumped up allegations and all that. I mean, Jordan is not a perfect man, but he's not an immoral man, and he's not a monster. He's a man. And Mikhaila is a woman. She's his daughter. One thing about the doctrine of total depravity, it basically gives people permission to be what they are, which is sinners, and allows that into the image and helps us deal with it. Because you know what? Someone comes into my office and says, I'm a sinner. And I say, welcome to the club. What do you mean? What? You've always been a part of the sinners club. Now you're in the part of the club that says, yeah, I'm a sinner too. That's the better club to be in. Ask anybody in a 12-step program. That's where it starts. And the video I did last week about that moment with Douglas Murray, yeah, same thing. He asks his friend Douglas, who he clearly trusts, do you think I am reactive when it comes to totalitarianism and on the left? Yeah, a little bit sometimes. Probably. But none of us are perfectly balanced. None of us get it right. We're all too reactive to this. This is going to be a far rantier video than I planned on making. I plan to be a nice, calm pastor. And part of what I learned from the recordings of the interview is, you'd better watch the press. You'd better be careful with reporters, because they've got all the psychologist tricks and all the therapeutic tricks of the therapeutic language and world, all the therapy tricks of Nebuchadnezzar's image. And they'll I'm your best friend. You can trust me, but you're not talking to a psychologist that will lose their job if they break confidentiality. You're not talking to a pastor who will lose his job if he breaks confidentiality. Who's made vows before God to keep private things private, sometimes at great cost. You're talking to a reporter. The reporter's going to take this out, and the closer to the center of the idol of Babylon, the more the elements of that idolatry are going to shine through. Okay? See, this is why I do these videos, because I had no idea. Because if I had thought of this Idol of Babylon metaphor, I would have had pictures of it in here, but I didn't. I got the idea while I'm doing it. This is why I do these videos, because I get ideas in the meantime. This is part of how I learn. And so he was a man on a mission, and we had the biblical series. But he's suffering, and of course, as this goes, and well, he's suffering greatly, but he's having great meaning. And so sort of opponent processing between suffering and meaning, and back and forth, and, up and up and up and up and up it goes. And he's battling the image of the age. And he throws himself into the mission. We can have a conversation. The dude probably needs a 12-step program about workaholism. But when I get later into this video, there's something there that, people are going to listen to this video and say, oh, you're a Jordan Peterson shill. Well, you obviously haven't listened to all my videos, because it's just the nature of reality that I'm going to get, if I do a very pro-Peterson video, I'm going to get comments from all the, oh, you're a Jordan Peterson shill. Most of those people have stopped watching my channel. If I do a video critical of Peterson, people are going to be like, oh, Jordan, and fair enough. I'm critical of the Times being critical of Peterson, but their criticality is illuminating in the sense of the mass media idolatry of the age and their enforcement of that idolatry. And so he throws himself into his mission. Meaning is the main tool against suffering, and that's what he throws at it. 12 biblical series, 12 rules for life tour. What did he say? Something like 135 talks or cities in 150 days. That's insane. Honor the Sabbath day and keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work. And I always have, this Sunday I posted a video, and I'm always going back and forth. Should I post a video on Sunday? Because you might look at such little legalisms and say, that's legalism. Yeah, sometimes. But there's deeper truth to it that deeply religious communities afford. And that's part of the reason if you want to know why Judaism and the Jewish community, is Paul going to go Jewish again? Is he going to revert back to the religion of his ancestors? Sabbath observances have kept that community together. And that was a big part of the Christian Reformed Sabbatarian thing. I've been reading George Marsden's Fundamentalism in America. It's a great book. I'd never read it before. It's a great book. It's an audio book. It's on Kindle. George Marsden's Fundamentalism in America. Great book. Very pertaining. I'm sure I'll be reading a chapter of this for this channel. But, all his validation is from people he's helped. And so, is he suffering? Yes. But, and again, as someone who is a pastor and has known suffering, if you're going to survive suffering and not let it embitter you, and again, this is a key thing with Jordan, which came through clearly in the Douglas Murray conversation and clearly in this conversation, because she keeps, I was so annoyed by that recorder. She keeps, were you angry with them? And this is a trap. Because if he says, yes, I was angry with them, aha, you failed the image of Babylon. If you say, no, I wasn't angry with them, aha, you're being inauthentic. Either way you go, they're going to hit you. And it's half of these questions they ask him are a trap. This video got my goat. Because I just want to scream at them and say, don't talk to reporters. Stick to your own videos. But here's the thing. The image of Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar's idol. It pays you if you achieve it. It punishes you if you cross it. Fiery furnace for you, Jordan. Jordan and Mikhaila. You're going to want a fourth in that furnace. Go ahead and read it. Book of Daniel. Then there are multiple medical crises that, and you get the sense that, he's keeping pace, but he just gets swamped. His wife gets cancer, and it's first a treatable version, but then there's a complication, and she's going to die. and they do a surgery, and there's a complication from the surgery, and they can't fix it. And then on their 30th wedding anniversary, and he emphasizes this a number of times, it's resolved. She's fine. On their 30th wedding. Coincidence? I'm a Calvinist. I have a very rigorous sense of providence, as does my Jewish friend Jacob. And that's one thing I love about Jacob. Calvinists don't like talk about chance. Now, that's a whole nother conversation about the 17th century that I'm not going to go into, but thank Glenn Scrivener for sending me some new videos with a new interesting guy to listen to and some more videos online. There's never ending. It's never ending. Anyway, back to the story. ADHD BVK that distracts himself in the middle of a story, and why his videos are way, way too long, and why his channel is small, because if he made better videos, you've got such good content, Paul. You've got such good ideas, Paul. Why can't you make good content? It's all about me. I'd rather make crappy content and continue to be able to have the conversations I have than hierarchies bind and blind. Ask Jordan Peterson. So the family doctor, who they trust, he's worked with their daughter, but again, Jordan talks about never having been a psychologist patient. And yeah, you can go through this story and say, and I don't know, well, Jordan would feel about this. It doesn't really matter. Should you have maybe done some more consultation with? Yeah, but this comes back around then to Mikhaila's point, which they had learned very clearly through her medical odyssey. Don't give yourself fully to the medical establishment. Doctors know some things. They don't know everything. Do you have to listen to them? Yeah. Again, it's like our relationship with science. Can you learn some things? Yes. Do they know everything? No. And again, the irony of this story, this is why a good biography would just be amazing, because would Mikhaila be his heroic hero if it had not been for her medical calamities? Providence, my friends, providence. You might say, oh, but the kind of providence we want, we match up to Nebuchadnezzar's image on the plains of Babylon. That if God is providential, then everything will go in my life. But there won't be a lot of meaning, and you're going to have a meaning crisis. And part of, when Jordan was talking in the first part of that interview, part of me wanted to say, you're not listening to your colleague John. Your colleague John had the language for the meaning crisis. And at the end of his part of the interview, where he talks about the message that he wants to get out there, Vervaeke's language of meaning crisis is better. Look around, Jordan, at what's growing in this little corner of the internet. We're continuing your work. It is a meaning crisis. Now, that isn't a knock against Jordan. The dude is trying to survive. But what you need is all around you, and it's true. So the family doctor prescribes him the benzos, and again, very commonly prescribed drug. I had a conversation with Nick about it, who, many people out there you can just go on the internet and you'll find all these stories about benzos. And he doesn't notice he doesn't notice it in him, but he knows he's able to sleep now. But then they want to switch to another drug, and they've got to get off this drug, and that's where it all goes to hell. And again, a big piece of this interview, which of course carries no space in the Times article, is really, you're gonna knock Mikhaila for changing the color of her hair and how she dresses? PC media is going to do this? That kind of stuff seriously irritates me, because women can't win. They can't win in this game. Well, neither can men, frankly, but she's a woman in her 20s. Give her time to live and learn and grow. And, one of the things, I frankly wouldn't hope for fame for my children in their youth, or really any time before their 50s, perhaps. because it's going to be fame for all the wrong things, because that's what the image of Babylon demands. The idol of Babylon. I mean, I'm sounding positively like the book of Revelation here, but that's the best language for it from the book of Revelation. It's the whore of Babylon. So then they go through the looking glass. And of all places, I mean, again, you can't make this stuff up. Here is Jordan Peterson in Russia. I mean, Jordan Peterson, who's his house is lined with Soviet era. And Mikhaila grows up in this house. And then she describes the hospital as a Soviet era hospital. And it's the old Russia where, you can't bribe people. And she marries her. I mean, this story, it's just astounding. So, yeah, what's American medical establishment never saw a drug they didn't love. And, now for years I'd managed to watch TV without commercials via TiVo, but now I cut the cord and all these streaming things. And so I'm watching commercials again. And now it's commercials for drugs. And if you want to see the image of Babylon, if you want to see this projected, idealized image, watch drug commercials. Because how do you advertise a drug? I mean, you can show a car, you can show a hat, you can show all these kinds of things, but these drugs have these made up words because what are you going to call the, anti-psoriasis drug or your, anti-diabetes drug? And so they have these AI engines that have these words that are associated deeply psychologically with certain positive things. And then you have these commercials that are basically creating the image of Babylon that all must come down to and conform to. Or, hey, if you don't get the COVID shot, you'll lose your job. Is this any different from the mark of the beast? Now, again, I sound like a conspiracy theorist, and I said before, I'm going to get the COVID shot as soon as I can get it, but the patterns in the book of Revelation, they're all there. Unless you conform to the image of the beast, you cannot do trade. We will take away your, look what happened with Patreon and Stripe and Carl Benjamin, and why Jordan Peterson got off Patreon. I mean, here it all is. And, am I a preterist when it comes to the interpretation of the book of Revelation? Preterism has its point. But the pattern still unfolds, and here's the image of Babylon. If you cross the image of Babylon, they will take away your ability to conduct commerce. It's not a conspiracy theory if John wrote it in the 1st century. So, Mikhaila's rescuing her father from the underworld. She is Pinocchio in the belly of the whale rescuing Geppetto. It's just, again, they're doing it in Russia. God is the best storyteller. He just is. Because no one would have, 3 years ago, Jordan's going to fall ill and Mikhaila's going to rescue him by taking him to the former Soviet Union and having Soviet doctors release him from the principality and powers of the Western medical establishment. There it all is. Cart that over to Jonathan Peugeot and he can make an icon of it. Well, he does traditional icons, so we're not going to see syringes in his icons, but this has the making of an icon. And if you look at akathisia, sounds like hell. 600-700 hours. Jordan describes this. It sounds like hell. And he endures it. And why do you endure it? Listen to him in the video. Because I've got to get my message out there. Because I've got to help people. Meaning and suffering in terms of opponent processing. And they're scaling up. That's what's happening. But then the image of Babylon, mass media reinforces the image's religious gender war angle. It's right there in the article. Of course they bring this up. Peterson's critics will undoubtedly point out that he built an entire intellectual philosophy upon the principle that life is all about pain and suffering. The image of Babylon does not want you to believe that. Normal life is the kind of life you see on the ads from the drug commercials on streaming TV. There is normal life. We're at the fair. Where I won the little doll for my grandchild or my wife. Let me tell you something. These images in the medical establishment, the medical industrial, the industrial medical establishment, they're idolatrous. No such life exists, but they keep feeding these images to us. This is the ideal life. This is the ideal life. Don't look at the man behind the curtain. Peterson's critics will undoubtedly point out that he built an entire intellectual philosophy upon the principle that life is all about pain and suffering, that the strong, manly response, it's not about gender. It's not masculine and men. I mean, if there was a simple lesson that this cultural can't figure out, it's that, which it seems to try to be saying, would just say, male and masculine are not the same thing, but male is real and masculine is real. Female and feminine are not the same thing, but female is real and feminine is real. Oh, we have to... No, I've never said that. Look, if you're a viable clinician, you encourage people to take psychiatric medication when it's appropriate. That's exactly what he said. What I really encourage in people is to understand that it isn't useful to allow your suffering to make you resentful. That's exactly what he said. And believe me, I've had plenty of temptation to become resentful about what's happening to me in the last 2 years. And that's true. And that's what he said. But has nothing to do with his penis. And again, the PC thing, you forget your doctrine when you're trying to foist it. And that's why the woke will not inherit the earth, because it will come apart, and every idolatrous image foisted on the plains of Babylon, reinforced in our mass media, will crumble, because it's not true. Because in the end, the definition of truth is that which endures, and the definition of real is that which endures. And you're very quickly going to be knocking on and looking for a little 3-letter word that begins with G and ends with D, and the Jews just put a little slash in the middle, or maybe in quotes, because not only can't you live without the idea of it, but the ontological argument then begins to weigh on you. That if you realize, I can't even have a philosophical thought system without the greatest thing which can be conceived in 3 dimension, in time and space, both inside and outside of time. Jordan Peterson doesn't accentuate gender in the meaning-suffering matrix. They do. They strawman him over the meds when it's clear from his point of view they are not anti-medical science. Mikhaila, and who can blame her? That's the thing. And again, I tease my sister about this, but I'll tell you, I deal with people who, and many of you are there, I know, because you write me, you exhausted what the modern scientific, industrial, medical establishment can offer, and they can't fix it. And so your idol's weaknesses are showing. And so it's like, how can a doctor be a Christian? Because doctors, more than almost anything else, know and understand the frontier of their knowledge. Because they have to live with the pain of seeing it happen and watching people die. Because they're doing their best, but they know their limits. Some of them, the good ones, know their limits. And so I don't blame people for going off beyond the frontier and saying, we need to do something different. Let's try diet and exercise again. Let's try less medicine instead of more. First, do no harm, remember? And again, I get exercised about this because this is so often true when it comes to psychiatric meds. And I watch And those who know me and this ministry and where I'm at and who I hang with here, no. I watch the doctors give psych meds to people, and it's trial and error. They don't know what these things are doing. They don't know the long-term effects. And yeah, what about the vaccine? Put it in me. It's all risk. It's all risk. It's not either or. It's not science or common sense. It's both. Science has its role to play, but it's got a role. It's in a box. The manifest image is bigger. It's both eyes you need. And this story illustrates that. Now into Peterson's double bind. So if you're a huge Jordan Peterson fan and can't hear anything that isn't in any way contrary to the little image you have in your mind of the little idol you have in your mind of Jordan Peterson, you'd better turn it off now, because Calvinist preacher is coming in with his commentary here. And this is something that ministers learn, because ministers, Christian ministers sometimes displace their Messiah. Because part of Christianity, and me and Jacob and I are having a big ongoing conversation about what exactly messiahship is. And I believe that in the four gospels, this is central to understanding those four gospels, that I need a Messiah. I am not one. The Messiah has come, and we are to emulate him. We are to listen to my sermon, the Sunday sermon. I thought my Sunday sermon went well this week, and it went a lot better than the rough draft. So if you want to listen to the Sunday sermon, you can find it on the church YouTube channel. The sound isn't as good. I mean, Rick and I haven't really figured out the whole sound thing yet, but we're working on it. Christian ministers get into trouble when they become their own messiahs. With everyone you work for, why do Christian ministers pray? Because I don't save anyone. God does. We ask God for this. I turn over my mission into his hands. It's his mission, not mine. And the minute it becomes my mission, workaholism sets in, anxiety sets in. Because, let me tell you, I love the Balrog scene in the first Lord of the Rings movie, because Gandalf is right. Swords will not avail you. This monster is bigger than all of us. The idol on the plains of Babylon you cannot take down. It will fall, and you may have a piece in its falling, but principalities and powers are beyond you. Ideas have people. People don't have ideas. There are lots of different ways to relate this and to relate aspects of it. Jordan Peterson is caught in a double bind, partly because of the limitations of meaning, which I've pointed out in many videos. Meaning, he is suffering incredibly from his mental condition and the withdrawal. Meaning is the bulwark from suffering. So therefore, the more you're suffering, how do you listen to Jordan's message? The greater the suffering, the more meaning you have to throw at it. But if your contact with that meaning is your labor, can you work your way out of your misery? No. What is my only comfort in life and in death? That I am not my own, but belong body and soul in life and in death to my faithful Savior Jesus Christ, who has fully paid for all of my sins with his precious blood and has delivered me from the tyranny of the devil. In fact, he watches over me in such a way that not a hair can fall from my head, and plenty have fallen without the will of my Father in heaven. Ooh, and right there you have the problem of evil and all of these things that Nathan Jacobs wonderfully documents in his movie. Right there you have all of those issues. How could God, you say, not a hair can fall from my head, and look how many have fallen. Go find a picture of me from 30 years ago. I had hair. It's all growing down here. I guess, there we have it. I lose it up here, gain it down here. I almost shaved off my beard this weekend. The beard is in danger right now. I'm not sure I'm going to keep it. Maybe I need guidance on how to tame it, because I have a cousin who grows facial hair like I do, his beard just keeps getting bigger. I don't know if I want to be that guy anyway, because I've got the image of Babylon in my head. It's on me too. Who can deliver me from the spirit of the age? I need someone bigger than me because I can't work my way out of it. If meaning is the bulwark on suffering, you might become a workaholic. Much of his meaning comes from pursuing his mission to spread the word. And what does that mean? Well, his former worker avenues have been taken away from him by the image of Babylon. He lost his very meaningful vocation of teaching and clinical practice in the C16 controversy. The replacement is tremendously meaningful, yet tremendously demanding. You know, before at least, it was on a small scale. I mean, people don't understand sometimes why I say I'm not, parts of me, I'm conflicted, of course, because wouldn't you like to have the money and the fame and the power of Jordan Peterson? Yeah, but that comes at a heavy price. A smaller YouTube channel, a few hundred people participating in, few hundred people participating faithfully in the Bridges of Meaning Discord server, nice little small church, colorful characters. Yeah, they're colorful characters. Good friends, open to new relationships. That's ideal. It's ideal. But he's lost his very meaningful vocations of teaching and clinical practice in the C16 controversy. And I wonder how things would have gone if he had never had the status rocket ride. Now, again, Providence. And Mikhaila says it. We have money. We can go to Russia. The whole family flies to Russia for Christmas. Cousins, parents, everyone. And, stays up in a hotel. My children would not have the money to save me from such a medical disaster. So, again, Providence. Mikhaila's illness. And again, look at my conversation with Brett Sockel. Justification is not the right way to think about it. But the extreme measures that Mikhaila could pursue were afforded by the status rocket itself. And this is how God always defeats Nebuchadnezzar's idol. Okay, throw him into the fiery furnace. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. See what happens. Well, the soldiers, they stoke the fire hot because the fire is replicating hothead Nebuchadnezzar's anger, and the soldiers die that threw them in because the furnace is so hot. And there the three are walking around, and the fourth looks like a son of the gods. And Nebuchadnezzar looks and says, now suddenly he changes his tune. Come out. And they come out, the three of them. And they don't even smell like smoke. Just a story. Okay. Just read the story. It's going to draw you someplace. It's going to draw you in. Do you really want to be free of it? Again and again, I talk to people. I can't believe the story. Just keep reading the story. Just keep living in the story. I can't make you a Christian. The Holy Spirit can. It's not you getting a hold of God. It's God getting a hold of you. And the stories are the way he does it. And so Jordan is sort of caught in the illusory promise of social media. I had a little interchange on Twitter this last week over this, because would Jordan be so big just on YouTube? No. It was the attack. He kicked the image, the Canadian, the idol on the Ottawa plains. Is Ottawa on a plain? I don't know. Probably. That whole area is pretty flat in Ontario. I've driven through there between Michigan and the East Coast. Jordan kicked the image, and the image decided to attack. Well, that gave Jordan a rise. And just watch GameSpot. I mean, that's the thing about these principalities and powers. They don't last. They come down, but they're succeeded by others. We just keep making these idols, and we keep propping them up on the plains of Babylon and declaring everyone must bow. When the music plays, or into the fiery furnace you go. Well, it's clear he's helped millions of people. So on one hand, mission accomplished. Jordan, you've created videos that relieve depression in people. You've created media that get at us so deeply, including a Christian minister, that obviously I needed to watch those things for reasons in my head. Or was it the Holy Spirit? Or was it both? See, part of the scientific image, you have a real bias against both and that's part of what we're doing, but it's both eyes. It's not one or the other. It's both. Do you pursue medical technology? Yes. Do you understand its frontier and sometimes go out into the wilderness to get what you need to come back in? Yes. That's what this story is about. So it's clear he's helped millions of people. That's deeply meaningful. But lots of talk about new media, replacement mass media. No, they're working together actually now. And I don't think we're going to see the disappearance of mass media. I think we're just going to see, as we've seen with newspapers and others, we're going to see the modulation. It gets fit into the picture. It doesn't just sweep it away. You know, you can still find horses. It's more of a hobbyist thing. We don't use them for transportation. And, you know, we're going to have another transition probably between internal combustion engines and maybe hydrogen or maybe electric or who knows what. But, you know, these transitions don't just, YouTube doesn't just replace TV. It's much more complex than that. And that's the relationship between mass media and social media. The two live in a symbiotic relationship, and Jordan Peterson epitomizes that in a rather tragic way. He needs these interviews, and in fact, he's probably contracted with them. And one of the most telling things in the video is at one point he sort of pleads, I need my job. Now, granted, I'm sure they burned through millions trying to keep him alive. But he's tethered to this image, to this idol. They need him. They're dying for him to talk to them. But he knows full well, every time he talks to them, they've cast him in a role. They have him playing a character. They've dressed him. And whatever he says, they're going to take whatever little role he's playing in their story and cast him in that story because they own the image. And social media at least sort of undercuts that, and it's a rival, but you know, the whole story about Google and Facebook and, you know, they're just the new image on the plains of Babylon. That's how these pieces fit together. So he needs these interviews, and he's not going to, well, for those of us who are sort of, I don't know, it's the wheat and the tares. You can't leave this stuff. So he needs these interviews, but they force him into their narrative, often unfairly. And this was a great example of it. And so, you know, he tries to fight back, but if there's one thing we've learned from this story is that, well, at least if you're limiting yourself to your time, maybe, and you know, the right side of history is sort of a symbolic way of talking about the fact that over time, the biases and the deluding images pass away. And there are other disruptions and distortions that come over time, but Jordan probably for the rest of his life will never be able to escape, for much of the population, the role that he was cast in as, and they said it, you know, they said it early on. To his critics, he represents the respectable face of reactionary misogyny and dangerous gateway drug to online alt-right radicalization. That's the role they have cast him in. That's the role they use to get the clicks. You know, I was commenting to Rick too. Rick and I talk a lot now, well, on Fridays and Sundays. But I was commenting to Rick that Rick and the Discord server are sort of my meetup right now. Can't wait for the meetup to come back so I can see more people face to face. But where was I going with this? Distracted myself again. Respectable, yeah. They've cast Peterson in this role, and that's how he functions. That's how they play him. That's how they play him in there. And now it's not so bad to stay beneath the radar. It's a little sore in my mouth, a little pain in my tongue. Gets in the way of my talking. This gets worse. I talked a lot yesterday because it's Sunday, so. And now I'm going to I'm going to put my preacher hat on. And this is a line of, again, preachers are thieves. I initially got a lot of these ideas from Tim Keller. Because, again, as I've mentioned many times, before I did the Jordan Peterson deep dive, I did the Tim Keller deep dive. And I was at a point in my life where I had a lot of suffering. And I was using meaning against my suffering. And one of the things that Tim Keller taught me via Viktor Frankl was, I mean, what Peterson is saying here, you can find in Frankl. I mean, this is not brand new. Jordan Peterson's story is new, but, Viktor Frankl went there before. Viktor Frankl went into a Nazi concentration camp. And Viktor Frankl saw, and this is the insight I got from Tim Keller, Viktor Frankl saw that the hope that you have needs to be outside the camp. And he tells a story of, he was there with his father, and of course the women and children were separated, and he was there, and so there was another guy in there that they knew, and the other guy kept asking, have you seen my wife? Because they could see the other camp. Have you seen my wife? Have you seen my daughters? Have you seen my wife? Have you seen my daughters? And Frankl and his father both knew that his wife had died. But his father kept lying to him. Yeah, I saw her. She's looking well. And I might remember the story wrong, so it might be apocryphal. If it is, go ahead and correct me in the comment section. But Frankl was kind of like, why are you lying? Well, because if he learns that his wife is dead, he'll die. His hope needs to be outside the camp. See, if your source of meaning is within the age of decay, it is vulnerable. And I think for Jordan, his workaholism is a function of his mechanism for addressing suffering. And, the stupid article wants to connect that with maleness. Manliness? Give me a break. That's such a cheap shot. And I find that cheap shot all over the place. People who want to prosecute a gender war can't get some of the first aspects about gender correct, even according to their own ideology. It's insane. If your validation and mission is dependent upon success, then the fear of failure or enough will stalk you. Look at the end of Schindler's List. I could have sold the car. How many Jews would I have saved? I could have sold this ring. How many Jews would I have saved? If that's what you're using to buffer against suffering, you're going to lose. It isn't sufficient. This enemy is beyond us. The whore of Babylon, the idol, Nebuchadnezzar's idol on the plain of Babylon is too big for you. You will go into the fiery furnace. And the reason I learned this from Tim Keller is because I'm not going to go into what it was from, but there was a lot of suffering in my life in that period of time. And I was crumbling. And I had a family to support and a job to keep. And I'll tell you, as a Christian minister, not a lot of room for crumbling. Because you've got to hold other people up. Where could I find my support to live through that suffering? I found it from a lot of people. I made some friends. I had people I could trust. I needed someone to talk to. And so I found people I could talk to. And so there was the talking cure. Again, the science doesn't go away. But I knew I needed a hope outside. Because I knew, and again, back to Christian imagery, I knew my life would be poured out. Jesus is 33. They're going to kill him. I needed a belief in the resurrection. And it's not just cheap in terms of, oh, okay, I'll get another world. Or I'll get another life. That's kind of cheapening it. It's not high resolution enough. I needed to know that I could suffer and I could lose. And God, so notice God raised him from the dead. That's the way Paul and Peter talk. Why? I knew that God could do something with my suffering beyond any emblem of outward success I had. My church was, continuing to die. It wasn't blowing up as a mega church. I didn't have a YouTube following. But I thought, I can be faithful. I can trust in him. I can go into the furnace. And almost every time you go into the fiery furnace, you get burned. See, Jesus goes up on the cross. The fiery furnace doesn't touch Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. But the cross kills Jesus. If your validation and mission is dependent upon success, then fear of failure or enough will stalk you. This will threaten the method of meaning to address suffering. You need something bigger. Why do most of my sermons have the structure of misery, deliverance, gratitude? Where do I get it from? I get it from the Heidelberg Catechism. First question and answer. What is your only comfort in life and in death? That I am not my own. That my life is not my own. That my story is not my own. But my story belongs to a bigger story. And it surely doesn't belong to the idols of Babylon. That there is a story writer and a story keeper that is beyond the right side of history. In fact, the right side of history tries to, in some ways, express the final judge of history, the final one who knows history. You might say, well, okay, that's just a mental model. Okay, start there. Put your God in quotes. But that's where I walk in with the ontological argument. Wouldn't it be better if that God was real? Wouldn't the story of Jesus' resurrection be better if Thomas touched his flesh? Wouldn't it be better? Why don't you choose a better story? Well, I don't believe it. Fair enough. Your belief is involuntarily. Why don't you lean into it? Why don't you not worry so much about what you believe and don't believe? Why don't you worry about what you do and how you act and what you behave and try to tell the truth? I mean, there's so much good stuff in Jordan's stuff. But I think this is where it falls short. You need misery, deliverance, gratitude. Is life suffering? Yes, it is. It's full of suffering. And Vervaeke's take on Jordan in Awakening from the Meaning Crisis, I think, is right. You can't just equate life with suffering. All humans suffer. All humans sin. There's a connection there. Suffering is inevitable in the age of decay. I don't care what the images, the medical images of Babylon project at me and the drug commercials. Having psoriasis or diabetes or, the law forces them to say side effects could be death. Oh, okay. You didn't picture that one. Here, above average looking senior citizen takes my drug. Doesn't she look good in the casket? Idols never work. Suffering is inevitable in the age of decay. We need a deliverance independent of and beyond our capacities. We are facing Balrogs. Swords will not avail you. Why is Gandalf a Christ figure? He dies and comes back. Right there in The Lord of the Rings. Nobody has a problem with it there. Well, that's because Tolkien made it up. Wonder where he got that story, that wily little sub-creator J.R.R. Tolkien. If our efforts flow from gratitude instead of necessity, we have a bulletproof relationship with outcomes. And this is what I learned in the aughts when my outcomes were small. My outcomes are a little better now, but they're still not that great, not compared to Jordan. I'll keep my outcomes. I like my outcomes. Because we can be patient when I fail. I can be patient when I fail. And I can be grateful when there's success. And almost always, any success in my work is only partly attributable to me. The Apostle Paul makes this point. Someone plants, someone waters, someone harvests. That's why it's the Holy Spirit that does converting of people. Some minister or some person or even some atheist might have had a hand in it, or some novelist, but we attribute it to God because everyone else is too small. So misery, deliverance, gratitude, misery, deliverance, gratitude, misery, deliverance, gratitude. Yes, you are miserable. It ain't going to stop. You need a deliverer. Well, how does that work? I can hardly believe that. Okay. Just keep acting like you've been delivered. Gratitude. Well, gratitude is joy. Gratitude is happiness. Gratitude is powerful. Peterson talks about gratitude a lot. Yeah. Connect it with this. And so, yeah, they are in my prayers. I look at a video like this and I just love them all the more. I love them both. Gosh, you're interesting. You're so real. You're so personal. You're so transparent. Are you perfect? No. Do you get things wrong? Of course. Are you human beings like the rest of us? Are you limited by time and space and what you can possibly put in this gray matter and act out in one little lifetime? Absolutely. But God so loved the world, full of all peoples like this, that he gave his only son, that whoever believes in him, whoever trusts in him, had that in the Q&A on Friday, whoever trusts in him, that's what we're looking for. And so I know how Jordan feels about that. I loved his conversation with David Nasser. That was one of my favorite conversations that Jordan had. The one after the stage rushing. And again, you can't make this stuff up with this guy's life. Is he used by God? Absolutely. My God is big and providential and bigger than any image on the plains of Babylon. So listen to that video. Listen to that. You'll have your take. You'll have your criticism. You have your critique. You'll have your, well, I would have done this. You'll have your, well, Paul got this wrong. And have it all. Have it all. That's the freedom that God has given us to do. I pray for these dear people, Is he used by God? Absolutely. God uses stories. God uses people. And I love it. I love it. I love it. Why? Because it's so real and it's so true. And through it, you can see, through that reporter, you can see the image of Babylon. Oh, Oz, the great and powerful Oz, the curtain is slipping. The curtain is slipping. And the new one will arise and take its place. And it'll read the book of Daniel. New sea creatures come up out of the sea all the time. And you wonder why. Why in the book of Revelation is there no longer any sea? Well, read the book of Daniel. It's all in the Bible, my friends. It's all in the Bible. Why is Jordan Peterson's biblical series so important? Listen to Nassim Taleb. If you want to have something that endures, use something that endures. So they're in my prayers for their health, for their opportunity, for their restoration, for their battles against the images on the plains of Babylon, or in Ottawa, or in Hollywood, or in New York, or in London. Freedom from achievement is part of his meaning dynamic. And that's, we all have our growing edges. I certainly have mine. Many of you have pointed out quite legitimately my errors and flaws in the comment section. Keep having at it. Read the book of Proverbs. If you critique me or criticize me correctly, you do me a service, because God is the God of all truth. He's the God of providence. He's the God of history. He's God. That's what the word means. You want meaning from labor, but it needs to be independent of outcomes. You need to work out of gratitude, primarily. Duty has its place, but there's a hierarchy there. And finally, misery, deliverance, gratitude. Everything that I do is out of thankfulness to God for the deliverance he has already achieved for me. I cannot earn my status with him, just like Mikhaila can't earn her love from Jordan. Jordan loves her because she is his daughter, and what he won't do for her. And Mikhaila, what does she do for him out of gratitude for all of the sacrifice and love? It's a beautiful story. And for this reporter to talk about manliness, are you blind? She's a woman. You pointed out in your article. Oh, that makes me angry. Most meaningful outcomes come after one's biological life, which means as a mechanism for life experienced bulwark against suffering, it will always fall short. We are against an enemy that will take us out. This Balrog is too big for us. That's why we already have a Messiah. That's why we already have a Savior, and we participate in his mission, but it remains his mission. It's a good place to end the video. Thanks for watching. I'm deeply indebted to those of you who thank you for your time and attention. John Vervaeke's language. I'm deeply indebted to all of you for so much that you've done for this channel and for me. I mean, financial contributions, contributions to the church. That's huge, because what is a church? Is Living Stones just within this walls? With many of you, Living Stones goes beyond this walls. And this time during COVID in particular, your donations to the church have kept this church alive. Have kept me doing these videos. But God is God and we are not, and he writes the best stories. And he's writing one heck of a story with the Petersons. And I love their telling of it. And even, I remember one of the members of our meetup here, we're talking about Jordan Peterson's status rock, and this was 2018. He was saying, Jordan just needs to get into more fights. And it's like, oh, I think he's right. But that's so hard on Jordan. Because every time they fight Jordan, Jordan wins. The prophecy of his vision comes true. They fight him. But here's the thing. Again, it's the pattern of the cross. I just have to say, Jordan, they will kill you. Who's they? It's the image of Babylon. It's the medical industrial establishment. It's the media establishment. It's the money. It's the success. It's everything. It will kill you. You will not get out of this world alive. We all know this. It's Christ working through you. And so don't let Sam Harris bully you. Almost certainly not to the answer of Jesus' resurrection is not the answer you want. It's most, go ahead, drive the nails in my hands. I will rise again. But here's the thing. I mean, it's so easy to slip into that messianic mode for preachers. But we're always, look to the Apostle Peter. Crucify me upside down. I don't deserve Jesus' cross. He's my master. He is the image. He is the potter. I am the clay. So, God bless you, Jordan. God bless you, Mikhaila. You're in my prayers. Keep fighting the good fight. Keep telling the story. Keep being who you are. And the only word I would give you is that let it be God's mission, not yours. Your only comfort in life and in death is that you are not your own. Thank you.